The Stanley County Board of Education work session, February 1st, 4:00 p.m. If you will, please bow your heads. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for the many blessings that you give to us each day. Be with us, Father, as we enter into our work session and into our board meeting later. Help us, lead, guide, and direct us so that we make wise decisions for Stanley County schools. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Madam Chair, make a recommendation to amend the agenda to include resolution to move the start date of the school year into number 3.
After number 3.
4.
Okay. Before number 4. Okay.
Before or after?
Before, yeah,
So number.
make it number 3.
Okay. So board members, you've heard from Dr. Dennis. We need a motion to amend the agenda to make number 3 a resolution for our calendar.
I make a motion.
I second.
A motion by Mr. Graves, a second by Ms. Coughlin. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that carries.
So what we have here is, we're about to approve our calendars in our regular meeting. Now, I know this has been a while. This come up in another district. This is really something Dean had put together. I didn't really mess with it much. But what I would like to do is I would like for the board to consider a resolution and move the start date earlier so that we can end our semester and take exams before the winter break. And that way, when the kids, especially taking CCP classes, whether it be welding or English, whatever, they'll be able to start those at the beginning and it just be, now this is something we've been talking about for a long time. There's no surprises in this resolution. I talked to someone, it did have a provision about the county commissioners involved, and I'm going to ask them also if they'll support it later on down the road. But unless you want me to read it, it's just a simple, we want to start school earlier. We would like to get our semester in. It lists here the detriments of not doing it, which, of course, the exams after winter break, the difference between the school calendar, community college calendar, the flexibility needed as far as scheduling makeup days, and the, what COVID-19 isolation exclusion protocols adopted by the states forced temporary closure of schools. We need additional flexibility for lost instructional time. So
What would the start date be?
we would, we could look at it a bunch of different ways. I wouldn't say we would start it like, way early, but was it last year we moved it back to the 15th? We were able to start it now. Yeah, so it's possible to do it around then, or if you want to look at extra cushion with some extra days in there, you can move it a little earlier. But that's just something that we would like to do.
It has down here that
No
to
later.
start school no later than August the 15th, so no later than August.
To get it by, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So how many counties, obviously, you want me to make a motion on this right now?
Oh, no, I don't think we'll vote on it till
You won't vote on it
till
until,
we get
Oh, the
in the
resolution?
main.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so how many other counties are,
I got this from Iredell State, but there's a lot of other counties that if you looked at the bills that were put out, had different calendar flexibilities. And we somehow missed the boat on getting into that, whatever that means. But there were included in bills and some by themselves that their local legislator had put in that they wanted calendar flexibility. None of it's been approved yet, except for their, if you're a restart school district, or we ain't got approved for it. And there's some other little, special exceptions. But everybody's just kind of putting them out there to hopefully one day they'll have the appetite for it. But the last session, I think it was Berger or Moore, one of the two, said, well, we're not going to talk about it right now because I just don't know if people really, care about it right this second. So I'm just hoping one day it does come to fruition. And if it's just something that we can get our names out there, that's all it is. Because we're looking at our calendar and this is the latest start date you can have since the 29th. It's not a calendar conducive to learning and children excelling in school. It's just not.
And I will say, Lisa Kaiser from the city actually contacted me this week and they're trying to plan summer stuff and they were like, what's their calendar look like?
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't even know this time.
So this is more just a position. It's not something that's gonna happen.
I hope it happens one day, but it just shows our position, saying Stanley County, and all of this come about a long time ago. It was 2004. I've taught in both. When I started teaching in 2000, it stopped at Christmas. We started around the 10th or something, I believe. It stopped at Christmas. My kids took their exams. They went on and had Christmas and come back, had a brand new, group of kids. And then when I had gotten and moved to Chatham County, I remember they changed it. And that's when we had to stagger it. And, I'm not saying test scores are everything, but if you're telling me that I'm taking these tests, or I'm gonna take a test, but I gotta take a 2-week break before I take the test, well, excuse me, I get to come back for a week and get a warm up.
It's not just test scores, behavior's a whole lot easier to make.
That's true too. That's a good point.
Those kids have to take an exam a week before the break. They're focused. If they got like 2 weeks after, which is what we have now, they go crazy because it's a week before, 2 weeks before the break. So
I've been there too, man, and we haven't hurt ourselves changing that. If this is just political pressure, I say we do it anyway. It's the right thing. There's no loss for us. We get to do this.
That's all it is political pressure, yeah. Because like I say before, resolution is only as good as what it's on, but at least let people know, hey, Stanley County, we're with the other counties believing that, I know y'all made an adjustment east because of something with, I guess, what was it? The representative there, I don't even know if he's still in, he might still be, but it was their tourism, and they say it was hurting their tourism. I just don't see how starting 10 days earlier is gonna kill the tourism.
He was, the guy was the chair of the education committee in the House, and it's the Bertie County, whatever those.
It was one of those eastern counties, yeah. Yeah, that's right.
So Dr. Dennis, you're going to share this and ask the commissioners if they will go in with us on this?
Yeah, I'm gonna ask them after we approve it if they
And
would.
then, do we get like our representatives, like Wayne Sasser, Carl Ford, any
I've
people like
spoken-
that to go in with us as
I've
well?
spoken to Wayne about this, and we had the same conversation that Mr. Sorensen and I just had. It was some guy from the east, and it was this, that, and the other. And I'm not gonna speak for Wayne, but I'm definitely, once we pass it, I'm gonna send it his way, and I say, I really need your support on this.
I like this. Thank you.
Not a problem.
So next up, I think, are the COVID updates. I'm not sure if I'm calling on.
Yes, ma'am.
Turner.
Yes, ma'am. We are ready. Okay, so hot off the press, we have, you can go ahead and open that up, Hope. We have last week's data. This dropped about 300 student quarantines from the previous week. So we're down to 623 quarantined last week, 82 staff, and also down are our positive cases. Students 150, staff 24 cases. So we continue to see Omicron is kind of making its way out. I think you can better see this information on the graphs, which are the next two slides. So here's our trend. I know, Ms. Watson, you said it's so far back, but you'll see where we peaked this week prior to our remote learning. And that was nearly 2,400 students quarantined. And then it dropped to 900 and something, and now we're to 600. So we're going back down. And if you look across, this is about the same as we were right after Labor Day. Okay, staff has followed the same trend. So hopefully it's going to continue in that downward trend. That's what we hope. And then the next slide is the positive cases of our school-age children and our staff members. We peaked, and then we've had a dramatic fall off. And the same thing for the staff. I think everybody's had it, and maybe you're good for 90 days, and so nobody else is going to get it. But that's kind of where we are currently. I'm going to talk to them a little more when we get further on into the agenda. Any questions before I sit back down? Okay.
So in looking at this in terms of how it's impacting instruction, it's definitely having an impact on instruction. I would target your attention to the loss of instructional time and inconsistency with instructional time. When we experience large numbers of students who are either positive or having to quarantine as contacts, of course, they're losing instructional hours. They're not in the building to have that direct instruction from their teachers. And also when we see teachers being quarantined or testing positive, they are not able to have that certified instruction provided to their students. And so that is where the real impact is being felt when we're having these folks having to go out for quarantining and for testing positive. So what that really translates into is a big concern with testing and accountability. Second semester is typically weighted very heavily at the high school level for EOC courses. So when we look at, just for an example, South Stanley High School, West Stanley High School, both did not test any Math 1, which is an EOC course, in the fall semester. They are shifting all of that to the spring semester, and the philosophy behind that is ninth graders transitioning in from middle school, you want them to acclimate more into that high school environment before you throw a standardized test at them. So for this spring semester, and knowing that we've already had to start with those 2 days of remote instruction, those students basically lost 2 days of face-to-face instruction with their teachers already, just right out the gate. So there's definitely going to be an impact there. And as we continue to have high numbers of potential quarantines and high numbers of students testing positive, that again goes back to my first opening thought there, that loss of instruction and that loss of instruction from loss of seat time as well. ACT testing is scheduled for March, and that is part of our performance composite that determines, how we're performing statewide when we look at all of our data. And then, of course, access testing is going on right now through March 11th, and that is our required testing for our English language learners. We do not have an extension option on that test. We have 302 English learners that have to be tested, and we only have 5 EL teachers who can do that testing. So every day is, it's of utmost importance to have people in place, both teachers and students, so that that testing can take place. An even bigger impact for us is with our exceptional children services. So if we think about when an EC teacher is out, when an EC student is out, and those required services that are mandated within their IEP are not able to be provided, if that continues over a prolonged period of time or as a pattern of, a student has to quarantine or the teacher has to quarantine, come back for a few weeks, has to quarantine again, comes back, quarantines again, those parents would then be able to petition us for compensatory services. And of course, that is done at an extra cost to the district. And not only that, but it is a detriment to those students who are our most vulnerable students to begin with. We have already been under corrective action for failure to comply with the 90-day timeline. I'm happy to report that at this point, we've only had one EC referral that has not met that 90-day time frame, but still even one is too many. So we don't get an extension on that time frame. 90 days is set by federal law. We have to perform all of those services required within that 90-day window. And quarantines and absences by students, that's not an excuse. You've got the 90 days to get it done. So again, the impact is being felt here as well. I went to payroll and asked them about some comparative data that we could pull that would kind of showcase the impact of teacher absences on the instruction, basically. And so what I asked them to do, sat down with them and we pulled last week, number of teachers who were absent. Now this could have been for COVID, it could have been for something else, but just raw numbers, number of teachers absent last week. And then we looked at the numbers of teachers absent this exact same week back in 2021, okay? So you can see in a side-by-side comparison, this year we had 406 teachers absent last week. This time last year in 2021, it was 253. An even bigger impact is on our percentage of fill rate, meaning how many of these vacancies were able to be filled with a substitute. Last year, we were able to fill 98.8% of them, but last week we were only able to fill 58% of them. So that basically means that students were in classrooms that had to be combined with other classrooms so that there was an adult who was covering it, or we had to have teachers who were having to give up their planning period to step in and cover that class. Or in some cases, we just had to split that class up and put some in the media center and some in the gym and some in the cafeteria, and have whatever person might have been able to wander through at that time to supervise those students. Now, in terms of quality of instruction, that is no instruction. And so that is a major concern for me in my role, in wondering, what is the ultimate impact of this going to be on our students? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. Can you go back to Beverly's chart and let's see where the peak was last January? Because that's very important if we're talking about how many, go back one more, yep. Is January on there?
No, this just goes back to the start of this school year.
Right.
Because I don't think we were in a peak
Right,
January
we weren't.
last year, so.
Surge.
No, actually,
we were.
we were. We had,
We
yeah,
went remote for 2 weeks
2
after
weeks.
Christmas.
yes,
For the week that you pulled?
yes.
Okay.
We were
That's
in
it,
remote
that's
at
it.
that time.
Okay.
Mhm. We were in full remote at that time because there had been a peak right after Christmas, yeah.
So the week that you pulled absences is when we were remote?
It would have been
No, we would have been.
coming off of it, I think.
Coming off of it.
It would have been
That would
coming
have been
off
the
of
week
it.
of that,
Mhm.
that we come back.
You see what I'm saying? Okay.
So, go ahead.
Right, when we transitioned back in last year, remember, we decided not to start immediately. We took those 2 weeks and then we came back after the MLK holiday, I think it was.
Right.
So these would have been comparable weeks to pull.
Right.
Yeah, do we have the data? Can we get the data?
For what, sir?
I mean, so that we can compare apples to apples.
Yeah.
Oh, back to what I had, yes. I'm sorry,
Going the wrong way.
this.
But that's just teachers. That doesn't show the whole quarantine for like the.
No, I was only looking
Right,
at
right, right.
instruction, correct. I was
Right,
only
right.
looking at teachers. This does not include bus drivers, cafeteria, custodial. This is strictly number of teachers, certified teachers who were absent.
I do have a chart for last year. It'll take me a minute to find it.
Okay.
I've got a question.
Yes, sir.
On this quality of instruction with the substitutes, I've got a concern about what quality we've got. It seemed like it's kind of dropped off, hadn't it? I mean, what are we gonna be able to do about that?
That is, I guess, where HR kind of meshes with curriculum and instruction. Substitutes are difficult to find, quality substitutes even more difficult to find. Ideally for me, I want to do whatever it takes to keep teachers in place, to keep our certified teachers in the classroom. I don't have the answer to that. I'm hoping that that's what you all will be able to decide and give us some guidance on. But I do not have an answer for the substitute shortage right now.
What's good morale like in these teachers? Because the teacher friends that I have are covering multiple classes, like you said.
And that's
It's kind of
exactly what
starting to-
happens. Mhm.
It's not good. They've reached out to me, they've reached out to her. I know Pennington, I mean, we all heard it. We heard a lot. And that week when we had to close school or weapon in the closed school, it was a mess.
So we could have helped them out a little bit.
It went down a bad path really quickly, I'll tell you that.
Okay.
And we had, that's what we were concerned about, is that we had a lot of subs and this covering this, and we were really just robbing Peter to pay Paul in a lot of situations. Then we were mixing kids, which wasn't a good decision. We were just trying to limp it to the end of the day because we knew we had all those days coming up. But anyway, I'm sorry.
No, and that is what I have to share with you. Any other questions, I'm happy to try to address those for you.
If we had to look at today, do you know, Dr. Giddis or Dr. Blake Lewis, Ms. Pennington, like today, did we have teachers covering other classes today in any of our schools? Did we have
Yes.
students?
Oh, yes, we always do.
Did we have,
always do.
did we have students even today that were sitting in a gym? Or they were sitting in a library with
I can't-
someone trying to?
I
don't
can't
know
tell you
about
with 100% certainty of that, but I do know that there are always teachers covering other classrooms. There is always a shortage of substitutes. And in fact, this year, because of our high number of continued teacher vacancies, we're paying more teachers this year to cover a fifth block, is what we call it, when they have to use their planning time to teach a block. We're paying more of those teachers this year than I have a current recollection of having to
Okay.
do.
So I know that it's not fun to give up your planning time because you very rarely have a planning time anyway. Second, are we pulling teachers that, let's just say we have an EC resource teacher and she's not able to teach her resource for her group that maybe comes to her because she has to go to another class. Is this happening?
I was recently made aware that, yes, that has been the case in some of our schools, and Dr. Holland is aware of that, and she is addressing that, and we're doing everything we can to make that not something that is happening on a regular basis. But that is, I think, testament to how short-staffed we can be on certain days.
Okay, I want to go to this too. So in middle school, do we have like maybe 2 PE teachers?
Most of our middle schools do, but our PE classes tend to be larger numbers of students, and so
Okay.
that's the
So
rationale for
where I'm,
having
okay,
two.
so where I'm going with this then is, are we having to have one PE teacher for a couple of different classes on PE while this other PE teacher goes to cover someone else's class?
I'm not aware of that specific incident, but it would not surprise me if that were true.
Because that would really bother me if that is happening, like in PE, especially when you've got.
A large number of students.
Right, and you've
That has
got
not been
activity
reported to
taking
me.
place that,
That has not been reported to me, but I could certainly see that being the case if a school needed a person to cover somewhere. Our need to cover classrooms is critical at this point.
And that has been since the very beginning of COVID, correct?
We
Not
have-
just,
I will say not as much last year. I think that has been much more exacerbated this year. I don't know if it's just, there are people who become more fearful of coming into our buildings to substitute. And so we are seeing, those low fill rates among our substitutes, much lower than we've ever experienced. And I think this shows that the exact same week last year, we almost filled 100%, whereas last week we filled 58%. Yes,
Does
sir.
it have much to do with the mask deal? Or are a lot of these substitutes afraid of everybody not being masked, or does that not make a
I
difference?
haven't asked them, so I don't know.
Oh,
What
we just had a workshop.
Yeah,
The
from what-
ESS
ESS
answered
shared-
these questions.
From what ESS shared, they said that some substitutes have said they wanted to come in if they were masked, and then others wouldn't come in because it was masked, it was mixed.
Okay.
This is a COVID issue, but this problem the ship's been taking on water for 15, 20 years now. Teachers are getting harder to find before COVID, subs are getting harder to find before COVID. You go down to McDonald's, they're gonna give you 15, 16 bucks an hour to walk there, and they can't find anybody. This is a global issue, and the foundation of our school system is failing, and it goes back to the 90s, if you want my opinion. I'm not trying to preach or anything, but until we make teaching an attractive job again, until we make subbing an attractive thing again, we've done all we can to make bus drivers happy, because forever you had to work 6 years before they give you full time. There's no reason to come here. You understand what I'm saying? So when you get COVID, which I think most people use as an excuse, I don't want to work. I don't blame them.
I agree with Bill. I mean, you're making 18 something starting pay at Hobby Lobby, you know.
And ESS, yeah, they said,
It's half and half, and people I talk to half wanna come, but don't wanna come because they're afraid of getting COVID. Half of them don't wanna come because masks are not masks. I think he's right, though. Subs have just, that sub pool used to be huge, and now it's, over time it's dwindled down. I don't think it's any one thing in particular. I think it's several
well, what
things.
sub wants to go into, knowing that they may have to be in a combined class, or they may have to go cover a class throughout the day. I mean, in other words, you think you're going in for Miss Jane or whatever, and you end up with Miss Jane,
Well,
Sue,
and I'll say,
whatever. all-
I
Three
started,
classes in one.
That's what I'm saying.
I started subbing pre-COVID, and that was always the case. Sometimes you show up at the school and they're like, hey, things have shifted, we need you somewhere else. I don't know that.
But it's still a problem we have to deal with.
It
Right,
is,
so-
and that is the
Yeah.
bottom line for me,
Yeah.
is that it's having an impact on our quality of instruction that we're able to deliver. And so that is my concern that I'm expressing to you today.
And the problem with what Beverly and I are going through is it's burning up our employees. They're sick. And they said, I just can't keep covering everybody's class all the time. And then her nurses too are taking on a load, and that's kind of where we are.
ESS said that this problem was happening in all the counties that they were serving. So, but my question is, what are the other superintendents saying? This is not limited to Stanley County. What are they saying? What are they talking about getting the General Assembly to do to deal with some of these issues? What's happening? Because this isn't falling on Stanley County School Board to solve the problem for North Carolina and the country. What are the other counties saying?
They're saying a whole lot of different things. It depends on the county, to be honest.
I'm laughing because is that what we're supposed to do now? We're supposed to fix
Apparently.
problems in the CDC, we're supposed to fix
Yeah.
problems with an $8
Well,
million
you know,
budget.
there's a lot of different, superintendents have a lot of different, I guess, feelings about how to approach it or what should be done and things like that. So I don't think I can speak for all of them. There, you know, there's some of them that, or a lot of them in school boards too. You know, they're burned up with all this. It consumes everything they do, and they're ready to get back to learning and they want it to go away. I mean,
Well, one of the things, well, of course, everybody wants.
but at the same point in time, they realize too that the most important thing is keeping kids in school. The kids being out of school,
Well, that is absolutely one of the things, but bad ideas, patching up bad ideas isn't the answer. One of the case in point, right here, it says that there was no extension option granted for like the access testing. If the state is not moving an inch to solve, this is something they can solve for every county in the state. They could say, we understand that we're in unusual circumstances. We understand this is putting a burden on all the school system. We understand that this is how they are measured in part, one way they are measured. We need to go ahead and immediately extend this, we need to grant this extension. So with all due respect, I'm not gonna be held to a standard the state won't even hold herself to. This is a responsibility of the state according to the Constitution of North Carolina. So I think we need to look for resolutions to this, but I think we need to be eyes wide open as far as what are we gonna be able to do? Because regardless of what we do, the fact we don't even have an extension there is gonna impact us. It's already gonna impact. If we were all wearing masks, walking around in a scuba suit, we don't have an extension. And we already have a situation where the kids are behind the curve coming into the school year. So.
What are the teachers saying that, and the staff, that they think the fix is for them? Because I'm assuming that these rules like the exposures have, and the contact tracing has really impacted us more with this last variant than maybe some of the other variants in causing some of these absences.
My conversations with principals, my conversations with teachers is that they would just be happy with whatever we can do to make sure that students can stay in school.
In-person learning.
Yes.
we
that
even
is-
have some of our most, and I'm not gonna make this about masks right now, but we have some of the most diehard people that are against masks saying, I just wanna have kids in school.
Yeah. Well, I'm getting those calls too from anti-vaxxers. So that were worried that we were gonna go on remote for a month. And I said, no, I'm committed to in-person learning. I'm one of 7.
And that's
but
overwhelmingly what
I've
our
got a
teachers
lot of
want
teacher
too.
friends and educator friends in the school system who think like we all do, but at the same time, their students are behind. They're having to catch them up. Mr. Bowers' daughter the other day, Taryn, almost didn't make it to her grandfather's funeral covering classes, multiple classes. So I feel like we got to do something to help these people out. I don't know what that solution is, but I guess that's our job, is to solve within the few options that we have.
We're gonna give you, that's where we're heading toward next. We're gonna give you options.
Yeah.
And we're gonna show what we're doing now and give an update on some of the stuff we're doing now.
Yeah, because to Anthony's point, I mean, we can't change the state. The state is, and to Bill's point, good Lord, it's been like that for the last 20 years.
So I was asked about options, and here's kind of what we got. All right. Right now, mitigating efforts, we're doing a test of study. And as you know, and I just pulled this straight off that, y'all seen this sheet before, this is nothing new to you. The University of Mass District, you do the day test on 1 and 5, and the students continue to participate in athletics. They must return negative on the COVID test. Non-households in this one are able to enroll in the study. We did the voluntary masking, so right now, and I'm gonna give you some numbers here in a minute, I know you want one. They're permitted to stay in school after doing the 3 tests. And, of course, after day 5, if it falls on the weekend, y'all know all that. Students are not permitted to participate in the athletics until after the 5th day. They've got to remain negative on the test and wear a mask. And since we're the voluntary mask and the non-household outside of school exposures may enroll in the study, but the ones that are household exposures may not. And there's just some additional details. Y'all guys understand all this, right? I'm not gonna bore you. I think you're pretty intelligent people. All right, so as far as test of the stay, here's the reflections from our first week. 2 athletic teams and 1 staff were eligible to participate. We had nearly 100% participation rate. There were no positive cases reported after series completed, so all the athletes and the staff were able to stay in school. The intense amount of work, it wasn't an intense amount of work required, but there's good news. We do have our EMTs now that are picking up some of the load, and it seems to be working well.
Right.
And a tremendous help. The process is working fine so far. The rate of participation is not as high in the general population or the athletes. So right now, I think you said this is a very loose number, around
It's on our
20.
second day.
Yeah, but around 80% are opted in. There's about 15 to 20 that are not. And so an intense amount of work, and positive cases detected through the first rounds of tests. And you had some,
So we're just on day 2, but in 2 days, we've already had some positive cases detected through the rapid testing. So they were asymptomatic students sitting in class who it was revealed tested positive. We're able to remove them and get them out before there's any more spread. And then there's some who opted in, who today began showing symptoms and have to leave the program. And then we follow our protocols for symptomatic students.
But
It's
those
important. It's important to understand that it's not like they were randomly picked out. It's that they were identified as having been exposed. So they took the test and it was like, oh, hey, by the way, you do have it. And then, or they may have tested negative, but they're starting to show symptoms. So the system's working. So that's good.
It is a great deal of work.
Yeah.
I cannot express to you. I would invite you to shadow a school nurse and see this process in place, because it is taxing our nursing resources.
And I have asked to do that, by the way,
Good.
today. And I also have talked to some other folks that were doing this. And I'm gonna ask this, the onboarding process is the difficult part.
It
is what I'm
is.
understanding.
It is.
And I needed to know more about it. And so I did some questioning on my own about how this works. But it is my understanding, once the initial big bulk of that onboarding, the next time, or if there is a second time, it is much
Correct.
easier. I don't wanna say easier, but a lot less work.
Right,
Because all the information is already in the computer. Is that correct? Okay.
correct.
because you got to sign up and they need some information to be able to.
I asked questions about how it actually
Right.
works.
And the way the program works, they don't send out mass permissions
Mhm.
just to have on file. If you are contacted as a direct contact or
Right.
positive, we send the link if you choose to opt into the program at that point.
So do you have copies that you can give them? If they don't
It's
have a
all
way-
electronically.
What,
It's all done electronically.
what if the people don't have electronic?
Everybody's logged.
Phone,
Yeah, they got their phone.
computer.
All of
Everybody's
them.
got one of those.
You mean out in the,
You'd be
Yes.
shocked. I got
Even the
clients that
students
can't pull
do.
a DocuSign. It's-
I saw a 4th grader pull the phone out when he got out of school the other day. You know, like,
So-
there's a lot of them out there.
Just think how it would have been if we'd started back that first week when it was 2,400. You couldn't have done it, or
No.
900, you couldn't have done it.
No,
And I think they did a good job because we just started with the staff and the athletes first. That gave us, they weren't overwhelmed
Yeah,
because now that you had 8,300 kids, possibly, not that they all do it, but you had that larger sample size and with the extra help that we were able to obtain it.
right, and we're having to
Manageable.
use our best judgment in situations where the positive is not known until well into the exposure period. So if, once we find out about it and go back and do our contact tracing, if there's just 2 days left before they come back to school anyway, it's not worth all the trouble to go through to do the test to stay. Plus, we can't get the 3 tests done in that time frame. They have told us they'll take a minimum of 2, but, to try to do the 3 tests. So there will be some who were direct contacts, but we're not given the opportunity because they're back in school in 2 days or a day. So we just can't, give it unless we are on the front end of that 5 days of exposure.
I want to ask about our staff,
Mhm.
teachers and staff, departments everywhere, okay? Are our teachers and everyone, are they jumping on board with Test to Stay?
Well, am pleased to say that no staff who was eligible has turned down the opportunity. So they have opted in if they were exposed
Good.
and not fully vaccinated. Now, we've had some fully vaccinated and boosted staff who were named as direct contacts. And, they can continue to come to
Yeah, they
work,
don't
so they're not
have to.
excluded.
Right.
But the program also says we can offer them just peace of mind to have the free rapid test.
Right.
But,
Did any of those take?
some have,
So how many that refuse to do the test to stay, how many out of our, how many students is that gonna affect in our schools, do you think?
Well, again, roughly, this is just 2 days of me looking at the data as it's being entered into the tracker. I'd say it's about 20% of the number that has been contacted and given the opportunity.
That refused,
And it's just, it's the parent's choice.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
so 80% have opted.
yes.
But it's the parent's choice at the end of the day.
Exactly.
But at the end.
And then,
Beauty of it.
and we've told people too, that you're not to hold a kid down. If the kid don't want it, then we don't give it to
Yeah.
them. Unless the parent can try to give it to them, we'll watch it if they want to and all that, but we're not going down that road.
Yeah.
So,
You mean if the parent would like him to do it, but the child is.
like if the child,
The
say,
little one.
yeah, the little ones,
Scared or
yeah.
whatever.
Say I come and do it and they're scared, well, I say, well, Mr. Graves, you can do it for
Right.
your child, but if they don't want to do it, we just say, never mind, we're not
Yeah.
putting a child through that.
Ms. Pinson, your number as of today? Your number as of today?
Number of,
Positive quarantine.
Today.
I do not have, there's still active entries going into the
Right.
tracker right now.
When would you have?
Yesterday's, I have,
We'll put it up there, we'll pull it up in a minute.
yesterday's quarantines were on, well, no, we haven't got to that part yet.
Yeah, we'll pull it up in a
Give me
minute.
that.
Okay, I'm jumping ahead. Okay.
Trying to get extra credit.
Well, we have the trend graph.
Yeah, young trend. All right, so let me go through all this. I was asked about the masking things going across, and y'all get this, y'all get the School Board Association's little newsletter, right? So you basically got a couple options. You either mask optional or required. Your mask optional based on positivity rates or required on positivity rates. I don't know why they differentiate that. But one thing I was asked to present was a mask optional by school basis. And so a new trend in several of these counties is to make mask optional unless you get by site to a certain limit. And so if I put a exclusion rate of 10% for 5 weeks, and that's just one, they're all a little different. I talked to the different superintendents and just asked them about it. And so what would happen is it would automatic trigger. So if all of a sudden your numbers started going up and you were missing a lot of staff and students, they would mask back up. One that does it is Surrey County, a real nice superintendent. So this is kind of what they've got going on. They do a 5% for, I think it's 2 weeks. That's a little high, but anyway. So you can see what happens when they get above their 5%, they mask up until it's for a certain amount of time. You can see where theirs is going to come off on 2/14. Obviously, they're 4.37 days, so they got over 5 probably yesterday, a day before, maybe last Friday with the 14.
5% of their students, right? This
And
is at
staff.
school.
And staff.
Okay.
You can do it a bunch of different ways. It's just the way they do it. I'm giving you an example. Everybody's a little different on how they do it. And so as you can see, scroll back up, please. What happens is, and I'm just looking at the data here, what happens, it looks like is the closer they get to the date to come back, the exclusion rate gets lower. And the reason being because of the way the toolkit's written, we know it, that you don't really contact trace anymore inside the school. If you're doing test to stay, everybody can do it, even your home people and all that can do it. And so it brings up all these different factors that reduces the exclusion rate. And so that's kind of what they're looking at. And I did ask if there was any setbacks amongst the superintendents. And, full disclosure, they said the only thing that we're afraid of, and this is relatively new for all these districts trying it, within the past couple of weeks, as they said, they're worried about bouncing back. So they say if you're ever looking at setting thresholds, just be cognizant of that. You don't want to come off and then 2 weeks later you have to go back on again, or even less than that. So that's something that I did talk to a couple of superintendents about as far as what they were doing to mitigate their issues with staff. And as far as those conversations, and they had been asked earlier, they were really happy with it. They said the community seemed to be fine with it because they just wanted the kids in school. And it really just addresses the schools that look like are about to go off the rails. And that's another option. I'm not gonna go over the other ones. Y'all know about all the other ones, but I don't think that's one that's been around that long based on my conversations. And it will be another mitigating factor if we had a school that all of a sudden started to rise really high and we started losing a bunch of staff and students. Here's your current exclusion rates. So the current.
Can you enlarge that
Let
some?
me, I gotta get my glasses to do it.
Okay. And we took the student quarantine, this is just students, from the last 2 Mondays. Yesterday, 131, and Monday, 124.
I know.
So,
Yeah, we can't really.
yeah, so what you got is, I'll tell you, the highest is 12% at Milliport.
Mhm.
Milliport was 11, it's at 12. Everybody else just kind of fluctuates around. So this was 7, this is 6, it went down slightly. This went down a good bit. Just scroll down a little bit. Yeah, so everybody else is relatively low right now. Milliport's the one that's shooting up.
Albemarle was kind of high, weren't they, from 4 to 8?
Albemarle was before, when we had to close it, Albemarle was streaming, but India was the worst. We had an exclusion rate of 70% in India at one time. I'll say I probably should have closed that school before I could, but somehow they keep holding it together. But going back to what you said, that probably wasn't the best thing because even trying to hold it together, we were burning out teachers and,
And the quality of instruction.
and the quality of instruction, there was no instruction in some places.
So, question, that one was at 12% Millingport. How many classes do they have at Millingport?
Milliport does not have, they have small, how many, is it 2 a grade level?
Not
Is it
even,
that?
I think it might be 8 or 9 classrooms.
Milliport, a small school, Milliport's a very small school, and it'll feel it a lot quicker because of just the low number of staff than will others.
So, we've got enrolled, we have let's say we have 300, 292, and there's 17, and that would be Indy. How many classes are in Indy?
2, 4, 6, 10, 12, 14 or 15.
Right, so that's a higher percentage, and of course, Aquadale has a high percentage. I think most people would agree that if you have a bunch of students missing out of a classroom, then that's gonna be a problem. Of course, one teacher takes out a whole class anyway. Not quarantining students, meaning that the teacher's not there to teach.
Yeah.
But if you're missing 2 students per classroom, then that's like normal flu season type numbers.
Yeah, so your percentage will be high, yeah.
The point of this is that to keep this in perspective, these numbers are interesting, but we really need to see what the impact is to the classroom for the students, the classes also versus the teachers as well. Because at the end of the day, we need to see this information that everybody can have access to. And then if you have real issues, then they're gonna present themselves.
Yeah, and that's,
Arguing with the numbers.
and that's why I agree with you. And that's why we gotta make sure we keep the kids are out just because they're out of that number. Just stick with the quarantine because with any school, if you get a certain amount of sickness or whatever that's running through the school, you obviously have to put in mitigating strategies. or you're gonna go somewhere you don't wanna go. And that's important that we make sure that we don't include all absences in just the quarantine and the positive.
So you're sort of kind of recommending we have a per building
I'm saying what,
Mask up.
mandate if necessary.
I'm saying if it
Someone
gets,
said way back at the beginning of this mess that we might want to consider doing that.
Right. I'm just gonna say, I'm dragging, so that's something we need to consider that.
well, and what happened, I don't think that superintendents and boards knew that they had, it was like one of those things, no one really asked or thought about it, because when all this stuff coming out, you never heard of this. It really just come about after this December when people started voting on it. I don't know if anyone has been doing it prior to. And I think everybody just thought it had to be an all or nothing type thing, and they took it that way until either someone started asking questions. You got a guy in Surrey and Camden. Well, they all stole it from Surrey. They all admitted it. We all stole it from Surrey. So somebody in Surrey figured something out. And then that kind of become a little thing. But I mean, you're right. I mean, and the reason we're talking about it now as a mitigating factor is that if we had it like an Indy prior to MLK Day, we would have stopped it before the damage would have gotten done. Yeah. And this ain't about masks. This is just about keeping kids in school. That's all it is. But
That falls underneath the toolkit.
it falls underneath the toolkit. Yes, sir.
That's the whole
You have
point.
very limited options in the toolkit.
What I'm looking at is, I'm looking at
12%, if you hit 10% of your population in a school building,
it's spreading.
And that was kind of the number we were looking at when we had talked earlier. It was a 10% 5-day before it lifts kind of thing.
But that's what I just got done saying.
But
If
10% of 200.
if 8% of that
Yeah.
10% are in 2 classrooms, that is a hell of a lot different than having
Yeah.
10% spread across 11 classrooms. It's a huge difference. So that's why, I mean,
What number does the board feel comfortable is a number to say when you
well,
get
that's the problem. We can't, okay, I cannot say, I don't know how anybody could pick a number based on what I just said.
Because, I mean, Central at one point had 600 students. And I don't know how many classrooms. You can't compare that to like Millport's.
Yeah, but the school shut down though. What he's saying is, had this been, in time of the Bill's point, had this been in place, we would have avoided the school shutdown. Because not only do we have the 10 or 11% of students, we got teachers and staff that aren't there.
Because what's going to happen is everybody's going to get, I mean, no matter how you spread it, I can make numbers look a lot of different ways. But no matter how you spread it, it looks like based on what I'm talking to them and when I'm looking at their stuff, when they do it, all the numbers start going back down. I'm just saying that's the data point I'm using.
One of the other is, so let's just recap. The trend is dropping. We saw a spike. We were lucky enough to have 3 days that were already scheduled where the students weren't going to be in. We were fortunate enough that the DPI let us use another 2 days to keep the kids at home. And it says, the quote is, so we have a minus 300 since last week. And Beverly even said, from the peak, we're seeing this is a dramatic fall off.
But
We
it's
just
going
started to test the state.
We only had it 2 days.
We just started to test the state. 80% of the students that were identified are participating,
And
which is gonna mitigate the
she
quarantines.
said almost all.
100% of the
Yeah.
staff
Yeah.
are participating that have been eligible to participate, and we've only been doing it 2 days.
So we had half the staff out on Monday that we couldn't fill. Right? The ESS, wasn't that the staff, 56%?
Well, the thing is, it's a protective measure. If it keeps going down, you'll never have to use it, so it's moot anyway.
And
It would just
test
be a
to
plus,
stay,
yeah.
as long as we are mask optional, household contacts cannot participate. That is a big majority. You may remember the last couple of weeks, I've given you, like last week, I think I gave you 3 graphs of how many of our contacts are household. The great majority of exposure is through household contacts. As long as we are mask optional, those individuals are excluded.
what you're saying.
What I'm suggesting, I think what's being suggested is, we don't want to be mask optional at Millingport until that total percentage of whatever
Exclusion
excuse me, that falls under 10%.
10%
We can do that
per school, per building.
At the end of the day, we're not asking these kids, hey, man, you got to wear that mask till June, whatever. you gotta wear that mask till this school gets under control. And I don't believe the masks do a heck of a lot. But if I hear one more person tell me we don't have to do it at CDC, the state tells me to punch him in the damn. We do have.
Gotta talk about it. Those emails constantly.
They did teach us
I'm not gonna say anything else, I'm just saying, I'm not a big mask fan, but once you hit 10%,
Though, I don't think it's a classroom to classroom thing. I think it's a school-wide issue. And whether it's making a difference or not, the time will elapse. The time will elapse for those kids. What's it take 2 weeks for the kids to basically to get off that 10% or?
That's what they use. Yeah, they're using a 2 week, but it looks like, with some of them, even they're using 2 weeks, they come back before that.
5 days.
Yeah, 5 days.
They're getting it at home after 2 weeks, people are either in the hospital dying from it or they're home.
Or they're getting better. I hate to be mean, but that's the reality of this COVID.
Miss Kim,
I'm with you, Anthony. I'm not for a mask. I'm just saying, if we can keep from dropping our cafeterias to one person working for 400 kids
That was rough, wasn't it?
and teachers
That was rough.
carrying 3 classes for 2 days or a week, it's something to consider.
Miss Pennington,
So let's take Millingport. Okay, so let's just say if Millingport had to, that was a school we had to put masks on to get this under control for 1 week. Let's just say 1 week. Now, okay, now everybody's masked up. So does those staff then fall in the category where they can test to stay if it's a household contact?
I'm gonna say yes, but I
Okay.
have to check with, the researchers that do.
Right?
We need to know
But
that.
they have said, because,
Uh-huh.
I've asked the question, if
Right.
we go 1 month from mask optional to mask
Uh-huh.
required and then back, do we
Can we go-
fluctuate with the regulations of the program? And she said yes.
Okay.
So even if it's week by week and
Right.
given at one school, I would think it would be yes, but I
And well, that-
definitely need to ask.
Well, that seems like to me, if that answer is a yes, that among your staff, then it looks like you would have your mask on a very short amount of time. I'm talking like,
If it's
or
tested.
less, I mean, but no more than 5 days. If you do the kind of the calculations and everything.
I have a question, and if we're doing test to stay and wear masks, and there's exposure, who then gets tested? Because if both students were masked, it was my understanding that, you understand where I'm going? So
And we
who
do
would
not
actually-
have to contact trace classrooms
Right.
when we are mask required.
Would we even be doing
You're
test to
still going
stay?
to have COVID exposure outside of school that impacts the operations of the school.
So the only.
So the
test-
household contacts,
Would
we can include in test to
But
stay.
that would
but-
technically be the only testing you would be doing.
But how many of our children, I want to go back, I mean, you
Okay.
wouldn't know this really, but how many of our
Yeah,
children?
real quick, just, and now everything for the board. We got some CT kids that made y'all some food and they were really hard on it and they want to serve it before it gets cold.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
That was
So,
awesome.
yeah, they're really excited about it.
My stomach's been growling.
Are they ready?
Let me
We have
see
it
how
set up
they,
in the.
No, it's, okay.
you can go to recess.
Okay, all right.
Y'all must have stole my ties. I stopped by 3 stores on the way.
No,
That was the only place they had one.
I need a motion to recess.
I make a motion to recess.
A motion and a second to recess. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, no.
Right.
Yeah, y'all got the same one.
All
That
of
one,
them.
I always go TJ Maxx, Ross, and Belts.
They had the fluorescent
Don't worry, Anthony had to remind me to call Bud last night.
It's in the middle of a good fuss and this thing.
Okay, so who is continuing now? Who is-
We are done with our presentation, yes.
Are we done with everything?
We have, I mean, it depends on if you guys want any more questions or if you want to talk about anything else or you want to see something.
Well, can you?
You were about to ask a question, and I'm sorry I had to interrupt.
Don't ask me what now. Can you pull back up that about where you have the schools with Millingport and others? I think my question is, if we had to do something today or starting tomorrow, would that school end up having to be
If
asked for?
if we were to do something, I would recommend something like that go into effect like Monday. Just so everybody gets time for it to get out and understand it, and get publicized.
And but then by Monday, those numbers could,
It could be a little higher,
or it could be lower.
or it could be lower.
Yeah, it's true.
That's what I'm, it's trending
Well, it's
down.
lower.
That's-
But we don't know what so we have these numbers here. I want to see the teacher numbers. I want to see the classroom numbers. Because maybe the answer is that if the kids are walking down the hallway, if one student is tested positive, we're not quarantining the entire school. So basically, we're looking at the classroom, right? We're looking at the classroom.
No.
No, the school.
No?
No,
So the whole school, if one student tests positive, the whole school's quarantined?
We're talking about spread.
Right. I
so if
understand.
10% of students and staff are excluded, that means you test positive or you're excluded for, quarantine or whatever. I'm giving you 10% as a
That was just
number.
quarantine. That was just quarantine.
We only had time to pull quarantine.
Right, I know,
Yeah, we're
but
just-
because you
yeah.
said earlier, the reason why you only included the quarantine was because we're gonna have a natural number of students that are gonna be sick. That's what you said.
But they
So-
could be excluded because they were positive. So that would include positives, symptomatics, and contacts.
Needs quarantine.
Yes.
But I think it's very valid to note that children are being excluded right now for a lot of things that are not COVID.
That's a fact.
Right,
That's
true.
a fact.
So in that number, there might be,
That number is only COVID. We're
That's
not,
only COVID, that's what he said
yeah,
earlier.
we're not,
those are only positives?
No,
No, that's,
quarantine.
you're told you cannot come because of our guidance. You're either symptomatic, positive, or
But
a contact.
symptomatic can be a runny nose and a cough.
But it's not been ruled out as COVID until
Right.
if they get an alternative diagnosis, they can.
I know, but that's what I'm saying though, initially, a percentage of that could be, I'm not saying it is, could be, one, they don't want to go get tested, which we know 20-something% are not doing that right
Right.
now. And they could literally have a sinus infection and they're in that 12%.
We could also set a slightly higher metric that would actually absorb that as well.
Right, I'm just trying to figure out exactly what we're looking
Like to take that account.
for. So should it be?
Okay, so here's the thing. All I'm suggesting is, if you're wanting the board to take any action, then we need some information. I don't think we have that information. Number one, we have this data up here, the 131. Is this after the test to stay where we had 80% participation of students and 100% of the staff? Is this after that?
That's when we started it. So these
That was yesterday.
26 or so Aquadale, can't read from here, 26.
Right.
26.
This column.
Those kids may have been quarantined the previous week. but
Right, 1 day, 2
flowed
day,
over.
3 day.
Right.
What I'm
right.
saying is, if I sat here and I start graphing all of this stuff out, I'm talking, we've got all these at these different schools, and then we have all these different, so this is how many kids out of the 14 kids, there's 3 that have 2 days left of the quarantine, there's 4 that have 3, whatever, this is 3 days, then we have 4 days, and then we have 5 days, and this is 7, and that's 14. Well, okay, so this is 6, and this is 1 here that have 6 days. What I'm saying is that if we cannot, I believe, impose, even on one school, masking all the students when it may be one class affected, it may be one teacher affected. Now, the thing is, well, Anthony, well, what if it's 8 teachers affected? That's a different story, but we don't have that information. So all I'm saying is
But
that
we just shut a whole system down though, Anthony.
we're not shutting the whole system
We're
down
just shut down.
because we peaked and we just dropped
I know, but
300.
this is a preventive measure to stop all of it. I hate the mask too. I'm not saying that that's the solution, but our teachers are stretched thin right now. We only have half the teachers out that can even be filled on the.
I understand that, but we do not have the data on why those
What do you
teachers
need
are
data
out.
when the whole system was shut down?
We shut the system down because the numbers were spiking. We wanted to.
Because we don't have enough teachers and staff to operate the things.
Look, listen,
I mean, what does it take?
we understand where you're at.
What's your
We understand.
threshold for that?
What I'm saying is, well, I understand where you're at. I'm advocating that we get information.
What other information? I mean, that's what I'm saying.
That's what I just said.
So he wants to know what I was asking, how many were actually positive? How many were actually quarantined because of symptoms? How many were close contacts? How many turned up positive? Because that 12% doesn't tell you.
Just keep it.
Well,
But it tells you how many are out. That's what we're worried about.
What I'm
12% of
saying
the
is,
population being
instead of,
out.
you guys are entertaining one option, that he masked the whole school because of a number that is arbitrary.
Not Jared.
But these other.
The guidelines are set up that way. We, the board, approve any of that. We're the policy setters.
Hold on, I know that. Let me
But
finish my
Jared and his
statement.
staff aren't doing any of this, Anthony. The government set it up this way.
Hold on a second.
They gave us a
Trust
mud
me.
pie or a crab pie.
Trust me, I get that. What I'm saying is that maybe there's a better alternative.
Well, what is it?
What is it?
Okay.
Okay, hold on, I'm trying to get to it and you're
Okay,
interrupting me.
hold on. One person at a time, just one person. Anthony,
Right.
go ahead. One
Thank you.
person. What is it that, okay?
So
express
what I'm
yourself.
saying is that if we got that information, then it may be that we say to Dr. Dennis, mask a class. Because if we're not quarantining the kids, which we're not walking down the halls and going to lunch, we're not doing that, then maybe we can accomplish what we're looking to accomplish by masking a class.
Okay, let's ask that question. Dr. Dennis, can a class or a couple
I
classes?
can't do it at I can't do it at high school or middle school. Because they mix.
Because they switch.
Okay, so in an
But we're
elementary,
talking about.
that is a possibility if, and would that even help us from what you're seeing right there with Millingport? for
That's a
instance?
Raleigh question, then, because it's gotta go through the toolkit people. That's my interpretation.
I'd have to look at all the numbers of what the classes all look like, but I would err on being consistent.
Okay.
With what
I see what he's saying though, because say 8% of that 12% are in 2 classrooms.
Well, I would say,
That's a good point, but.
But you see what I'm saying? We don't know by looking at that 12%. I think that's, and I'm not saying he's right or wrong. I understand what he's trying to say is what I'm saying.
Anthony, I'm gonna buy you a habit, for you and me, but.
Well, let me ask you another question. Another question.
Okay,
What
hold on
if-
one second. Hold on, Mr. Frank. Hold on a second. Hold on. I was gonna go get back over here because you were talking too. Was there something, Mr. List, that you wanted to bring out?
I didn't have any other questions,
Okay.
but what I'm saying is, to me, this board, I believe that our job is to educate children. And to me, we're doing test to stay to keep kids in school, right? So we're going out telling the community, instead of doing a countywide mandate, we've got this option or that option. Basically, the government has given us. And I'm telling everybody, well, we're doing test to stay because we want to keep our staff in school and want to keep our students in school. And I have a ton of friends in the school system, both administrators, teachers, and classified staff. I have family in the classified staff position, and everybody is stretched thin. The morale is terrible. We got teachers, to Dr. Amy Lake Lewis's point, that are covering multiple classrooms. And I don't see why, and my second point is the whole system just shut down for 2 days. And I believe that it's prudent of this board to allow Dr. Dennis and his staff to take some preventative measures to avoid that in the future. Not that it's gonna happen right now, but this board, and I love your point, and I love your point. I think that the stupid rules that the government set us up with, it makes that difficult because of all the mixing and stuff, and the exposures are the problems. But I think this board, we're all Republicans too, have a lot of people out there, Democrats, independents, and conservative Republicans, that would like to see a measure like this, to take some action to say, you know what, we really care about our teachers and our people, that we care about this community. We care about Mrs. Pennington, I walked out of the finance meeting with Anthony last night because, Anthony, we talked for a while, and it was 8 o'clock and she's still here.
She's always here.
She's been pleading us to do something. And I think that we got to take care of the people. I don't know, we have to try to find a solution inside of the very limited options that we have.
So Chairman Gibson, okay, I understand that, and I agree. Several points. Number one, I want to make sure that the options that were given the superintendent are the least intrusive options that are going to be as effective as possible. Okay, so that's number one. That's why I'm saying more information, more data is going to give us the ability to make a more informed recommendation to the superintendent. That's number one. And also, it's also going to support whatever decision he makes. He can point to the data and we can say, okay, you can't argue with the data. That's number one. Number two, you can't use the fact that we chose to do the 2-day deal, I'm gonna describe it like that, against us, because then we could just say, well, we wouldn't have done that, and then that wouldn't have even been factored into it. So let's just set that up to the side.
But we chose to do that because the board, remember, you didn't want to do the math. We were 3 schools shut down as we were talking in the work session.
That's right.
Shut the whole system.
I remember why we did it. We all agreed to do it.
Exactly.
So what I'm saying is that after that, one of the reasons why we agreed to do it for 2 days and not 10 days or 14 days was because we had test to stay that was going to be implemented. And Beverly and the central office, we found out, hey, they're going to be able to start it even faster. And we're like, oh, this is awesome. This is great. We just have had it implemented for 2 days. So not only don't we have an accurate amount or a broader set of data to analyze, we see a trend, a dropping trend, and we've only been able to use it for 2 days. So what my thing is that an option is that we wait a week and take a look at the data. Another option is you start off at the least disruptive, which will be at the classroom level. And the teachers, one question I had for you was, if the staff is masked, and they participate in the test to stay, will they be quarantined even if there is an outside exposure to them or not?
If it's a household contact
Household.
that comes after the work contact, then they would be excluded and have to quarantine.
So
But
this is
if it's
another
a
bit of
different
information.
kind of contact,
I understand, but we
it
have.
prolongs the test to stay.
Right, and here's another data point. If what our interest is also dealing with the fact that teachers are having to cover for each other because they're getting quarantined out. We just started the test to stay, we're only 2 days in it. If a teacher,
The teacher started last year.
exactly, second week, excuse me.
But for students,
But-
it's the first.
Right, for the first week. If we have a situation where the staff is wearing a mask, and they're participating in test to stay, that potentially could deal with the situation where we have the staff being quarantined out. So another option would be that we could have a menu of options for the superintendent. One of the options is you can mask all the teachers in a school.
I don't know if he can do that.
We were just talking about that right now. It
Yeah.
would single out people. It could become a big issue.
Wait, if we say, oh, hold on, we just talked about singling out a whole school.
They're just, my school is fine.
The whole school.
Right, that's what I meant. So the option is, if we say for the teachers, if you had the ability to do by the school, for the teachers as a whole group, what are you saying is that we cannot, the superintendent can't mask a class if it's over a certain percentage?
That is not advisable, because you're singling
You're
out
singling out that class.
particular students.
Not based on anything other than there is an increase. We're singling out a whole school. What's the difference? How are we defining a cohort legally?
I don't get it.
Right.
Madam Chair, Dr. Leffler has.
Sure.
I've got a question. The mask, you're saying for the teachers to wear the mask. The mask does not protect the teacher. The teacher's not protected by the mask. The students are protected from them, so we're not protecting our staff just by masking them singularly.
I'm not talking about medically, I'm talking about quarantine.
Well, even with quarantine, if I'm asked the teachers and they're still around the students, that negates them being masked.
Yeah, yeah, it has to be both.
For the toolkit.
For the children.
For the toolkit.
That's where the whole problem is.
It's the toolkit.
It's the toolkit. But we gotta find a solution.
Well, we do have, the last thing, the last comment I'll make on this is, we do have, there were two slides up there on the screen. One of them was where there was I guess the county, or the system-wide masking, and then the optional masking. There were two sets of criteria. Right now, we're operating under the optional masking set of criteria.
Yeah.
So, I'll revert back to what I previously said. I personally would like to see more data so that we can see what options the superintendent has. And then we can make, I believe, a more informed decision. Because as I said at the workshop, if anything that we do, if it does not have the direct effect that we're wanting, then we just continue to lose more credibility. The community says, you guys are just throwing stuff against the wall. So I just want us to make a more informed decision. That's just me personally. So,
Okay, Ms. Coughlin, Ms. Coughlin.
I don't think, and I'm not saying I agree, disagree with anything it said, I don't think 2 days is long enough, and I don't know how Ms. Pennington feels about this, to get an accurate measure of how well that's working for students. I do think that we need to lengthen that time before we make, and I think that's what he's saying, he's wanting more data, and I too would like to see how well that is work. We've already put tons of effort and time into this, and I feel like we hear time and time again from staff and nurses that we throw something at them and then we change the rules, and we throw something and we change the rules, and then we change how we're doing things. Not saying that we can't change how we're doing things, but if it's possible, I would like to stay the course a little while longer and see how well that will work for us. Is that an accurate feeling?
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
2 days is not enough.
Yeah.
And with the locations where we're testing, I don't think we have a good view of the district as a whole, because it has been primarily focused in elementary
Yeah,
at this
okay.
point.
Ms. Watson, do you have something?
I just think if we ask them to do much more, we're not even gonna have them. I mean, this is getting. I mean, Beverly was walking out that door at 8 o'clock last night, and that's not right.
Well, I don't give anything less than what my team does.
I
And my
know,
team
I know that, darling, but we don't wanna lose you either.
Nurses are crying every day.
Well, that's kind of my point right there.
Yeah.
At some point, we gotta protect our people. We
Exactly.
gotta say, this was a business and this was my business. I'm gonna take care of my people. And I think right now, we're playing too much politics.
Yeah.
And we're not, we're not taking care of the people. It's an underpaid, my wife's an educator 14 years. They do not pay any of you sitting in this room enough for what you do. Y'all are retired educators, but you're still a young woman.
She was whipping that head.
Yeah.
I will say this, no matter what we do, or y'all do, I should say, that yes, we are looking after our people and they've come to us that y'all need to look after us. So whatever we need to do, no matter how it goes, needs to be timely, it needs to be direct, and we cannot get in that position we were in again. So I'll leave it that way. We cannot go back there.
We cannot go remote again like that. We cannot.
I don't want to go remote
We
at
cannot
all.
do that.
That's our goal because it's just not working well. And a lot of what we don't hear, and I hear some of, I don't know, maybe you guys hear too, is that a lot of people that have big feelings about this have, I should say this, a lot of people, it seems to me, that express big opinions about this have options for their children when people go remote. And there are a large contingency of people who you don't hear from that don't have those options.
But you were talking about this, to do a whole school. These people that you've talked to, that's what they've done in this work, right?
Well, I'm gonna be honest, it's new to them too. A lot of them just started like, I think the 18th one started. This is a kind of a new thing, a new way of getting this. So I can't say I've got a ton of data from them either.
Right.
So they're just going through it as well. And they were real honest with us and they like the option better than some of the other options.
Yeah.
But, it's relatively new.
Their rates were really high too, like their positivity rates in their county.
It was strange because their positivity rates in their county were aligned kind of with us. But one of them I called didn't have a hard problem in the school. And I kept asking, you contact tracing all right? It's like, oh yeah, I am. And they just didn't have huge numbers. I said, buddy, I'm having huge numbers here. And he said, that's kind of what I put it in, was the impetus to keep from getting there. But yeah, it's new. So even looking at the other districts, they've only got a couple weeks data too. Because they all waited to after Christmas break to start, even the ones who approved in December.
Or even we go back out to, and we have our regular board meeting. And it's your time to talk about this. You're going to share this? Or have we shared what we're going to share in here?
I'll do whatever pleases the board.
I think though, I know y'all are stressed, but I think one more week of data would be helpful.
I think so.
You could go ahead and shoot that first shot, it's the opening round. We may end up doing this as the COVID numbers.
Here, we're looking at a surge that's going away right now. It's just nationwide, actually. It's the next surge we got to look at.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Oh, I'll tell you what, if this is what y'all want me to do, I will go out and I'm just gonna give all our numbers where we currently are and talk about the test to stay and stuff like that. And I'll just, if you want me to, I'll discuss it, looking at some different mitigating factors. I could say, we're using test to stay as a mitigating factor. I could say we had a really hard time before, but if it looks like those numbers are going in this direction, we're gonna have to get together and find out what mitigating factors we can put together to stop us from getting where we were before. If the board agrees.
Because it's not just the students, it's our people. It's our
The
people.
biggest problem,
That's what we got.
the biggest problem is our people.
It's our people.
And I'll stress that. It is the people. And I also stress that, and I'm not gonna say it this way, I'll promise to be more intelligent, but we're playing a game.
You are from Oakboro.
Man, look at this.
Blame the health director. That was-
But I will say, I will say it in a nice way, that we're playing a game and until someone changes the rules, we gotta do what we gotta do to keep kids in school.
Exactly.
But if it starts going down, we need to meet then and do something instead of waiting for it to get tough.
Exactly. If we get to a nice,
bottom out time, that's the time to come up and talk about this and approve it when nobody's being affected by it. I pray we don't have another surge. If we have another surge, you knew this was coming.
and I'm hoping to pray on that downhill slide. I mean, it seems to be the numbers across the state.
But our employee problem is not alleviated.
I appreciate
Did
it.
I hear that correctly? Our employee problem is not alleviated. Like the surge has gone down, we're seeing numbers dwindling for the
The
students.
thing that makes our employee problem so tenuous is the lack of coverage especially.
Yeah.
And that's what exacerbates it. It will be a little easier to control if I had better sub coverage. And The fact that I don't, and the fact that I have schools, and someone, I think, Mr. Sorensen mentioned earlier, that people are not being in education. I've got a school right now that's down 6 teachers.
6, yes.
I've got a high school down 6 teachers. So there are already subs in that area. So it's just, they can't really take much. And to your point earlier, Mr. Graves, is it's situational by school too, because some schools can absorb it better than other schools. Albemarle High School can't absorb much. You know,
So what?
Albemarle Middle School's down too, but some schools can absorb it. Some of these elementary schools can absorb it a little bit.
I think if we don't do it, we really need to stay on top of it. If the numbers are dropping like we all say, by Monday, nobody should be in it, even
That's what I'm agreeing with you.
even if we would approve
We
it.
can, if we can.
But we need to make sure that the first thing that Beverly says that it's going up, we need to do something then instead of waiting for us to have
Oh, yeah.
to go remote. I mean, I have no problem. I do kind of have a problem with waiting, but if we want to wait till Monday and see, I think we're going to be lucky and it's going to go down. But if the first sign that we've got it going the other way, we need to do something then. We don't need to be monkeying around with all this stuff. Because half the public is disappointed with what we're doing because we're not masking. And that's another half. They're not voting because they don't want to be intimidated by the other people. But half our people are.
If that's a pleasure of the board, that's how I present it. Very much.
And then basically our motion will be that we are remaining masked.
And I'm
You're not gonna change the status.
We're remaining mask optional.
And I have one more question. Ms. Pennington, when you send out our numbers, and I apologize, I did not have time to go through all that today when you sent it out. I did see it. Are you sending out how many are, in that test to stay, like weekly? Like how many? I guess what I'm asking is, we're saying we want to see another week or so. Are we gonna get that information from you?
If that's
How
what you
many?
want, then I can do it. It's very time consuming. It's like full-time statistician
Yeah.
needed to manage the data alone with
So
COVID.
there is a problem. We're actually.
Yeah, I know, that's why I just said
I'll talk to you about it.
ask for that.
I mean, yeah, I want to ask a question on this. Because I'm sure the board can approve something very quickly. Do we have getting somebody to help like this, if we want to spend, for.
That's what I told her I was
For
gonna
a
talk about
2-month
later.
temp, getting somebody in here, can you do like 501c3 donations in the school system?
Can we find anybody?
Think through like.
You can do donations. We're not a 501c3, but a school system can take donations from the public as a write-off for that program.
Okay, all right, because then I will personally contribute to get somebody in here to help for that purpose, so
How
that,
much?
because $5,000. I will donate $5,000 to get somebody in
Let
here.
us look at our COVID monies
I'll
and
put
some
some
different,
Okay,
guys, let's look at our COVID monies and different things that we got going on. Because the one thing is, and and Beverly wants everything done right, so she has some ownership and don't, this is a conversation we've had. And she has some ownership in it, and so I think we might have to be looking at what we can take away and doing some different things. We'll have a conversation. On how,
nobody wants you, or nobody
don't
wants
wanna
anybody to
put
have to work any
No,
harder.
I don't want to put any more work on her, but I
Right.
do think that that's valid information that we need, but I don't want you to be here at 10 o'clock at night either.
Well,
Right.
But I don't want to put
again,
nurses in
nurses
first
and
Yeah.
the health assistants are working crazy hours. And nurses are fully back into COVID, and I want you to understand that. There are, for example, one nurse told me today, there's a pregnancy action plan that she's not been able to get to. And so somehow, the school counselor got a hold of her action plan template and did it for her. That's what people do. They help each other out. There's a new diabetic that is coming to school with high, readings. She's not had time to get to that person because it is all tests to stay right now. So if you talk to any nurses, just be prepared. They're stretched to the limit.
Well, just a quick thing, because I need to go on record as saying this. a nurse's first responsibility is to that person that is a diabetic that may be testing high. Because the last thing, if somebody doesn't get their test to stay, that's one thing. If an ambulance shows up because the kid's gone into diabetic coma, that's a whole, or shock, that's a whole nother thing.
And
So,
they're worried about liability for our district. You know, these are committed
Sure.
ladies who-
sure,
who want to retire with us and have been around for a while. And they're tired.
And we tell them that, you know, you have to prioritize the most important thing at that moment, you know, but yet they still believe, you know, like you said, that's like, they feel liable if somewhere something goes through the, you know, falls through the cracks and.
But they apply that same ownership and that same work ethic to COVID.
To contact
They do the diabetic, they don't want to miss anything.
mhm.
Beverly, how have the EMTs that have started?
They've been wonderful.
Wonderful. Good.
And if, I think Ms. Copeland said it earlier, once we get the onboarding done, the next time someone's exposed, it's gonna be so much easier, but there's a lot of front-end work
Mhm.
to get somebody ready for the testing. But to not have to then test the students too, that does relieve the nurses.
Do you have as many EMTs as you
Yes.
need, or can we get more?
The first 2 days, we had 6 that were committed, only used 4 each day. Tomorrow, I'm using all
All
6.
6.
Right.
Right.
And between now and when we come back, I've got to text them where to go tomorrow.
And you've got, they're signed out for the month, right?
Yes, we've got a whole calendar for the whole month.
And it was my understanding when I was asking questions about how this worked, that typically when you onboard a student or an athlete or whatever, the first time it could be like a 30, 40-minute process, depending on how many questions have to be answered. The next go round, you know, since athletes will get tested more often, I'm just gonna use that as an example, I guess. It's like 2 to 5 minutes because all the onboarding is already in there. It's just a repeat of the actual test, more or less, than putting in all the information because it is a clinical trial.
Mhm.
There's a lot of information that, you know, they have to fill out and put in and scan barcodes and things. And that was what I was asking, because I was just unfamiliar with the process.
Good. Okay, good. Thank you, Ms. Pennington, Dr. Dennis, Dr. Amy Blake Lewis, Ms. Cone, Mr. Dudley. Thank you all. I appreciate the conversation that everybody has had. I think it's been productive, and that's what we want, and I appreciate that. So at this time, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Okay. Motion by Mr. Graves, a second by Ms. Watson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. We are adjourned.